Back out in the empty countryside, with frost still shining in the patches where the sun hadn't landed, there was space enough to see the forest spreading. And then they were on a skybridge leaning towards the city, and the first other vehicle, a new model shaped like a water droplet sent into the wind, coloured like darkened silver, sped by, and the first tremors of the city touched them before the cruiser was even close. They rose up and crossed a shadowed lake joined by other silent, skimming vehicles, and then a tunnel to the city, black as midnight at midday before effervescent bulbs like dying stars rained from above. Lee adjusted his chair and leaned back, looking out the window as the glow of something in Gong's contacts split and reflected in the glass. At nearly 300 miles an hour, shunted from lane to lane automatically, the occasional blare in the primary neon of the tail lights of some monstrous stream of trucks carrying materials from the unnamed, unmanned and unmanaged mines and quarries far from the city roared past. And it would be madness if it wasn't routine. Lee saw a party in one of the longer, double-layered cars that streamed alongside them, and for a few moments the interior was clear. A woman in a silver sequined dress was dancing in a serpentine sprawl, coming closer to the window, twisting eerily, as the occasional flash of light from the vehicle's ceiling revealed her and the other occupants, dressed in formal attire, faces mad and slippery with intoxication. A man's hands were on the glass, and then on her, and then she was laughing, and then they were shunted away by the omnipotent AI, rollicking down another length of tunnel, catching up with a mass transit carriage that moved like a pinball onto the roof of the tunnel, and away into the wealthier southern districts, and then they were gone. The tunnel dipped sharply, and so many vehicles joined them that Lee felt for a moment the pressing sensation that always gripped him at the end of a shift, when he felt he was being carried in a sea of metal and glass. Every light was artificial, every car shapeless, fluid, and in a rush, such a hurry. The tunnel opened up onto another skybridge as the traffic exploded into the western district of the city, and concrete and fiberglass behemoths in a crystalline forest shone in the glare of limitless electricity so powerful it dampened the sun. There was so much air traffic, so many drones, so many blinding solar panels, and the rumbling of a million heating units and low-lying satellites and personal unmanned vehicles, and lasers for advertising and the occasional blimp for the more retro and fashion-conscious, that a perennial sense of mid-evening, like permanent sunset, lay over the city. A swarm of delivery drones like iron hornets rushed them while they shot like a missile into a glass tunnel underwater, and then arose downtown as the all-day bars and barbecue stands at eateries and vendors and tea houses and androids pressed closer where the sidewalk met the road. They stopped for a moment with a jarring halt. The universe fell still. One of the few outdated crossings. The sudden change in motion roused Gong. "We're there." "Not long," Lee said, looking at a particularly strange android, twice the size of a person, made to look like some god of muscle with long blonde hair. A group of student types, early 20s, with multicolored projected wigs and glowing contacts and feather blankets and a real wooden guitar, were crossing next to the silver and immaculate uniforms of a research company and their bankers. "What we stopping for?" Gong asked. He sounded groggy. "Thought they had these crossings fixed. Last dinosaur in the city, ain't it? They need to clear this shit up, slowing everyone down, eh?" "Heard some locals got together and lobbied to keep it," Lee said. "Like an antique. A feature, I guess." "Is Sane on the way to the precinct?" "Yeah, I know. Decided to go straight back to mine instead. You still on the clock?" "Yeah, got a few hours." "Let's get that diary uploaded then. Try and get a lead, brief the captain. We can do that from mine. I need some quiet and some space to think anyway." Lee flicked at his feed to check the precinct portal. "Jensen is on shift. Can't be doing with it. We can do this remote." "Yeah, fuck Jensen, we'll go yours, yeah?" Gong said. He took out a police cap from the front compartment and rested it over his eyes. The people and androids and machines were finished crossing, and then a glaring hologram advertising some kind of real leather shirt was taking over the entire street, and if they were driving manually, it'd be impossible to see the road. Then they were swerving through tight, right-angle streets where the traffic got lighter, and then the steam of cooking yams and gambling outlets with jutting verandas that smelt like home were closing in on them, and the cruiser was up onto a platform and in a seamless motion lifting them to Lee's fourth-floor apartment. The exterior parking spot slotted into place at the side of the building, just as the avatar greeter appeared in the windscreen, and the doors to his apartment moved aside. "Welcome back, Detective Lee," the apartment AI said, leaving the windscreen and following him in floating light, as he went onto the balcony to look down at the street as Gong stiffly got out of the cruiser. Just as a way of updating you in accordance with your preferences, we still have 12 days until the next credit payment will be taken from your ID. And on another note of interest, we noticed that Davis Leathers is having a full sale on their range of real leather socks and shirts. If you'd be interested in getting a delivery, the shirt could be on your back in 5 minutes with a subscription too. Lee waved the projection away and leaned down and took in the sound of the city and the feel of the neon and the pulse. Did it always sound like this? Was it possible for concrete and brick and steel to move with a heartbeat, a rhythm like an organic being? It had something. It had something living, urgent, something that moved and flowed like blood through veins. It had been so quiet out there in the country. So quiet, still and slow. Even the way the wind had moved was different. Lee had felt it. He looked down at a projection of a huge giant panda in red and green, glowing lights eating from an immense bowl of noodles as a group in suits sat down at a table under a canopy, whistling to a waiter android that was dancing on the street corner selling something he couldn't quite make out. The sound of a karaoke bar and someone singing strongly with lots of feeling but little pitch made for a creepy echo that bounced from the glass of the storefronts. And then he saw someone who looked about 100 years old, prodding an effigy of something in a barrel that seemed to be on fire. A few people came over to watch, one of them in theocratic clothing, his wife covered entirely in black cloth. They seemed to be asking the old man what he was doing, or maybe they wanted to prod the burning effigy too. But then a drone came down and beamed them, and an android officer arrived on a bike, pushing through several others who had come to watch. One of the singers from the karaoke bar had come onto the street and had the microphone in her hands and a tiny speaker at her waist, and she was serenading the gathering crowd, trying to entice them underground. "Back to the realm of the sane, eh?" Gong said, lit a cigarette and walked into the living room. Lee's apartment was sparse and well kept. He had a large open living room with a small kitchen and a private elevator that led down to the street or the mall 2 floors below that. Everything was blue and black. His counter shone with dark marble. Automatically, the kettle began to boil, and his outdated android emerged from its charging cupboard and started to prepare the tea. "Get me some strong green tea to wash away that crap," Gong said. "Green tea? Of course, Detective Gong," the android said. The model looked like a standard version of a harmless, affable, clean-cut old man. "Would you like anything to eat, detectives?" "Noodles, soup, with plenty of beef and spice," Gong said, and sat down on the sofa, turning to face the windows. Lee waved in the air, giving Gong basic access to the apartment console. Gong darkened the living room windows as an airship flew by, drowning the street with holograms of a new product launch. Red envelopes began to sail up into the air, before exploding in a cacophony of projected gold coins and a smiling lucky cat. "No white is no year at a cat," Gong said, feeling his stomach. The cat was sleeping when they had the race, Lee said. He went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. He looked tired. He was tired. He looked older. Ever since 30, the rough, handsome looks he had taken for granted since his teens had definitely started to wane. He needed to find somebody. He needed to get somewhere. Maybe he needed to be somebody. What did he need? Did he need to make it, and soon? What did that even mean? He couldn't be a base-grade detective at 40. He didn't want to be like Gong. He didn't want to be scraping for retirement. 2 ex-wives and children scrambling for his attention and thinly piled savings. What had he been doing this last decade? Where did the time go? What were all these serious thoughts doing crowding in? He washed his face and looked deep into the first cracking marks of wrinkles and the shadows of darkness under his eyes. Perhaps he shouldn't look at his face so closely. Perhaps no one should. The countryside was making him feel strange. "When was the last time you'd been out there?" he asked Gong, changing into his informal police suit. It was fitted and smart. He looked better. He was still in great shape and it matched his age nicely. He gave his face a quick smothering of lotion, hidden behind the mirror. That was a habit unthinkable until after 30. "Out in the country? Been fucking years," Gong said. "Not since I bust that colt that had the gall to start raiding the outskirts. You remember that big one? Shit, they got big. They were the real thing. The children of you." "Children of you," Lee said. "Yeah, I remember that. About 5 years ago, wasn't it?" He walked over to the kitchen counter as his android placed the noodles on the living room table. Gong began eating sloppily, taking big mouthfuls of the soup. "You get food and drink with this place, yeah?" "Yes, but alcohol is charged and we're on the clock," Lee said. "If you get a beer, it's going to be tracked. They've still got your blood on review." Yeah, I know," Gong said. Give me a bottle of Coke, he said to the android. Why don't you give that thing a name? Everyone else does. Kind of feel bad for the bastard. And why you got a man doing your errands? You think it would look good if I had a pretty model in a short skirt serving me when I bring a date around? Lee asked. It's weird. And I'm not giving it a name because it's not breathing. You'd make no sense, Gong said, snorting and taking a big slurp of the noodles. Nameless manservant. Ha! You're a freak. Shit, get that diary up. Let's get something going on in here. I want to work. I'm on a roll. Sooner we get this case closed, sooner I can drown in something I can actually believe in. Wonder how long you'll believe in it, Lee said quietly. He poured the kettle out and made himself a bowl of noodles too. The light of an air cruiser, big cops, much bigger than them, spanned by the windows and made strange lines on the wall. Lee walked over to the table and sat on the floor as they ate, sinking into the cool light and mild heat, the infinite spring of every place in the city. He sent over the data they had so far in their timesheet, making sure the captain knew they had the diary. He flicked at his feed and Joy Gray's handwritten words were projected above the slurping figure of Gong, half in shadow, his eyes dim and bleary. Lee leaned back, not wanting to be too close to Gong while he slurped. The upload began to organize. On the right projected column, in red, were the most common words. Below that in green were names. Lastly, in the final row in blue, were places. Search names, Gong said to the AI, finishing the last slurp of noodles and burping with great force and pleasure. Hanshu. No precise match on that name, detectives, the AI said. Several names in flashing green appeared in a column on the right, as the mass of writing was made tiny to fit between the floor and ceiling. Han, Gong said, lying back against the sofa, lighting another cigarette. It filled the room with twirling smoke that sank and rose in the projected light. 6 matches, detectives. The writing separated from the body of text, spaced out enough for them to read each passage. I see Han at the front of the hall and notice his hair. He looks over his shoulder. I'm not sure if he saw me too. Han is playing music at the party at Dimitri's. He stands by the console on a stage. There is a beautiful girl next to him and I don't know if they're a couple. Han takes my hand as we walk back in early autumn at dawn just as we cross the corner of Jiaxing Street and notice the leaves changing. It was the first frost that year. I try Han's domain for the first time and realize what he can do. He draws me a VR version of Jiaxing Street and his own music plays around us as we walk under the willow tree where we first kissed. When I come up there is a new bracelet on my wrist with real sapphires. I tell him I love him. I fight with Han about how much time he's spending going under. He says he's working on something for me, but I don't believe him. He's staying so long all his vitals are connected to the pod. I realize I am worried that Han is starting to fracture. Ain't much, Gong said. They're all memories, Lee said. Flashbulb memories. He drew up another couple of paragraphs at random. It's my 6th birthday and Marius sings the happy birthday song in a really annoying way. And I know it's not serious, but I get upset because I think he's ruining the party. The first time I smell burning carbon and know I'll never be like my parents. I think about reporting them. You reckon she wrote down everything that ever happened? Everything she remembers? Gong asked. Just the flashbulbs, Lee said. Moments of significance. The events that came to her. Shit, I wouldn't want to dig that far down. It's not chronological and there's no obvious structure to it, Lee said. He expanded some of the paragraphs and scrolled through the air. If she'd put titles or timestamps on this, it'd work better. If this was digital, it'd be default, but all this handwriting, hundreds of thousands of words, this could take days, weeks with just the two of us. Nah, fuck that, let me try something, Gong said. He pushed away his bowl and rubbed the side of his face, wiping away the sauce. Analyze data connected to Han and other names, he said to the AI. What are the most common matches? Consider the pronoun him used after mention of Han. Yes, detective, the AI said. And try to create a chronological list, Lee said. Then present the data with most recent first. I do not have enough data to accurately compile chronologically, detective. I know, just try, Lee said. Han is potentially mentioned with one other name, the AI said. Would you like to see the data, detectives? Nah, shove it up the recycling bin in your ass, Gong said. I do not understand, detective. Show us the fucking data, Gong said. Please wait, detectives. Gong finished his cigarette and put it in the empty bowl as the android server came and bowed and took it away with an air of submission and compliance that didn't sit right with Lee. He kept the android in the cupboard for a reason. He didn't even like to think of it there sometimes at night, lying still with its arms crossed, all straight like a vampire. He didn't like the way its eyes suddenly sprang open. Maybe he should get a new model, something that really tricked you into thinking it was human. That thing still had one toe in the uncanny valley. Data has been compiled, detectives. Professor Marcel calls on him, and she seems challenged by the question. He asks her why we come up in VR when we die. He seems obsessed with it. She tells him it's the same in dreams, and there must be a consistent neurological explanation. But when she can't really answer him, and he presses her more, it gets awkward. But I respect him for it. I wait with him outside her office. I can tell he isn't right. It's the second time I think of fracturing. I start to think if we could both stay under, maybe it would make more sense. But it makes me so sick when I come up after diving for so long. But it seems to mean so much to him. I'm worried if I don't keep diving, he'll find someone else. That's better, Gong said. Search for Professor Marcel at the City University, Lee said. Search for student IDs listed at the same lectures as Joy Gray. Search for Han Shu. If not officially listed on the intake, run scans of digital IDs registered in lecture halls at the same time, matching said names. You have my clearance to reference my badge and case number. Data will take a few minutes to compile, detective. That's fine, Lee said. And give me video feed of the IDs, if found together. Yes, detective. You reckon this professor is going to be the independent witness? Gong asked. Could be, Lee said. If Joy and Han went to see her together, they'd have been picked up on the university feed at some point. If the professor had her suspicions about Han, or she saw him acting strange with Joy, reckon we'll have something. Ruby's shoe is big, but if we get 3 claims on Joy's side, the parents' testimony, the diary mentions, and the professor, we should have enough to dive. Gong stood and flicked the passages of the diary around him in a vortex like a small galaxy. He looked consumed. Lee could tell he was starting to get a sense of things. I realise I am worried that Han is starting to fracture, Gong said. He stood in the swirling, lumescent data, and flicked it all away except that sentence, then shifted it to the side. Search for fracturing in connection with Professor Marcel, Gong said to the AI. Give me a summary of how they might be connected, and possible consequences of fracturing relating to VR, heavy users of VR, and fracturing as a disorder. Yes, detective. Fracturing is a term not yet used in the DSM, but was put forth in the PhD thesis of Professor Marcel to be considered as an addition. The abstract of her thesis puts forth the hypothesis that fracturing is a personality condition similar to schizophrenia, emergent in heavy users of VR. She proposes that it is a hypnagogic condition in which people lose the ability to differentiate between dreams, waking life, and VR. How you like them apple pies? Gong asked. I have found the digital IDs matching Han Shu and Joy Gray meeting with Professor Marcel at the university, detectives. Would you like me to request that footage now? Yeah, Gong said, and get a call to Professor Marcel at the City University. Tell her police are on their way.